Hey, this is Jose Galison of No Way Jose on the Liberty Movement YouTube channel. Today, my guest is Sal Mayweather, aka Sal the Agorist. Basically, he's known as being a meme lord. It's kind of how I introduced him. And he's a man of many coats, or whatever the hell the saying is. I seem to have a knack for like fucking up sayings. I've been noticing a lot of episodes. Whatever, you get the idea. Yeah, I'm going to allow Sal here in a second to give a quick intro for himself, but like a real quick one, just kind of a condensed one. Because what we're doing here today is I want to just do an episode on him. I've been doing a lot of these lately, and this kind of came from something Vin said, where he was kind of talking about his whole idea of magic. And one thing he brought up, and it kind of like really clicked with me, is like we like to think that we come to positions through logic. And he says like even something like one good example for me is actually I have two good examples. Is like, for example, my transition from minarchist to anarchist and from anarchist to agorist were both like in a sense they're like, oh, I read a book and then now I see myself this way. But in reality, like the Anatomy of the State is what made me an anarchist. It was Dave Smith that got me to read that. So it was like the magic of him, is what brought me to that. And then with agorism, it was Pete Quinones. So there's something to that. I think it helps to get to know someone before you get their message. And I think that was something to that. Like I kind of found myself identifying with them or relating to them or feeling like, as nerdy as it may say, like I kind of had a relationship with them in a way. I know that sounds like very simpy, but I felt like there was kind of a magic of personality there. And that's kind of what brought me to that. So I've been trying to do some of these episodes with certain people, especially people I see myself being able to have multiple episodes with. I want to do these and kind of just do an episode on them and just, their life's journey and stuff like that. I mean, if any of you guys have seen my Vin episode, we did the same exact thing. And if you haven't, go check it out. We went completely into basically his whole bio from a little kid. It was a fun episode. With that, Sal, you want to go ahead and give a quick intro for yourself, just a super condensed one, since the whole episode is an intro of you, basically.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an agorist and anarchist activist, and that's sort of my whole mission in life is to promote agorism and counter economics to the best way possible. And that's probably the shortest way I could describe it.
All right, well, that's short and sweet. Can't do much better than that. With that, let's start out with we're gonna do where and when you were born. Like where and when were you born? We'll start out from the beginning. I mean,
I'm originally from Jersey. I grew up about 15 minutes outside of Lower Manhattan, and I lived there for most of my life. I'm 33. I'm about to be 34. And I just moved to Florida a few months ago to get away from Fidel Murphy and Emperor Cuomo and the totalitarian martial law that they were instituting in the Northeast. So I came down here where there's no income tax, there's pretty good gun laws, if there is such a thing, and I don't have to worry about 3D printing laws. So it's I'm in a much better position here. It's also a much cheaper cost of living. So that's basically it. Yeah, born and raised right outside New York. I grew up there, and now I'm a refugee from the northern slave states. People used to escape the southern slave states into the north, and now we escape the northern slave states into the south. It's funny how we reverses,
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually here in Florida as well. I live I'm like an hour, 45 minutes ish away from the Tampa area, from Tampa. So I'm in that general.
Oh, where are you?
Tampa area. I'm in kind of Apollo Beach, Riverview, Ruskin kind of area. I don't know if you know any of those places yet. You haven't been here long, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I parked in St. Pete, and this is where I'm at. That's the only place I know is my local area. So.
Like St. Pete, then yeah, where I work in Tampa, so I'm like 45 minutes away from you.
We're neighbors. We're neighbors, bro.
Yeah. So cool. St. Pete, that was another question I was going to get into earlier, but I guess we kind of jumped the gun. I was going to ask if you kind of went rural, because I live out. I mean, you kind of get outside of Tampa, you can kind of get more into the country a little bit, and that's where I'm at. I mean, not country. I have like a wilderness preserve that's like my tree line behind me, so acres and acres, and I have about 2 acres where I'm at. But I mean, being 45 minutes outside of a major city, that's not bad. So
right, yeah. I'm more of like an urban guy. I've never really been in a rural setting. Like I don't really know about the country and stuff like that. But I'm not opposed to it. You know, if you think about it, really, agorists sort of go one of two ways, right? Everyone sort of does either the rural, you know, homesteading, dirt in the fingernail sort of lifestyle, or they go the other route and they become like this sort of digital nomad sort of lifestyle. And I don't know. I'd almost prefer to do both. So I figure I'm young enough to sort of move around now, and when I get older, maybe I'll, you know, do the whole homesteading style, agorist lifestyle. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in the in between. It's like, yeah, you are right. It's usually one extreme or the other, but I'm kind of not like, I mean, I have 2 acres, so it's not like I'm definitely not homesteading, but I'm in that spot where I'm kind of like in a good mix, where I'm close enough to civilization, and I'm like in a shit hits a fan type scenario. I have enough land where I like, and I'm like against the woods, so, and I got running water,
Yeah.
and, you know, stream behind me, all that. So, I don't know, that's nice, but I'm still like near civilization. It's kind of a happy medium, but I mean, it would be nice if I
Yeah,
could.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if shit hits the fan that Florida's going to be too distraught. I mean, I think that it'll affect probably the whole world, but Florida's probably going to do better than most of the country, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing, I've gone in a couple of these. I kind of like when all this stuff started off, I really hit the black pill really hard. But then, like, honestly, the funny thing is the black pill kind of prepared me in a way, because it kind of let me get a little bit more prepared. And now, like, in a weird way, now I'm kind of like white pilled, because it's like, especially with discovering agorism, it's kind of like, you know, you learn that the people who, you know, prepare are the ones who thrive. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, definitely.
because people think of a collapse and they hear words like shit hit the fan, but that's just a simplistic way of putting it. It's like it'll hit the fan for some people. Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head too, because the people who prepare today, those people will be sort of the landed nobility of the future. You know, that will be the next generation's upper class. You know, so that's why it's so important to like do things like, you know, buy precious metals and cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Super cool. I didn't realize. I assumed Florida, you were probably like, I don't know, in the Panhandle, or I don't know, just a million other places. Didn't realize you were, you know, basically right next door. That's kind of cool.
yeah. I parked here. I've been thinking about setting up like a Freedom Cell or a Bitcoin Cash meetup or something like that. So if I do, I'll you know, keep in touch. Maybe you can help me out or something. Find
Yeah,
some
for
people in
sure.
the local area.
Yeah, we've had, I think, one meeting we did. It's because, I mean, this is part of the Liberty Movement YouTube channel. I think you're in the group. We had the Liberty Movement. We kind of had more steam at the beginning. We're still trying to do it like during the lockdown. That's kind of, everybody was on social media, so we got a good headwind there. And we we have a few chapters set up, and one of the chapters set up was the Florida. We have the Florida chapter, and then we have sub chapters, the Tampa sub chapter. And we already had one meetup. We hung out, had some beers and stuff, and so that was fun. So
Cool.
if we ever do that again, I'll definitely let you know. So that'd be cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, it was just a get together, but that's kind of the idea of the Liberty Movement. It was like the whole idea is to be cultural and non-political. So like, and a lot of people like freak out, like, what does that even mean? Because everyone wants to engage in some sort of, you know, action, and the only action they know is political generally. So it's like, and we try to take a neutral stance where it's like, I mean, I have my own opinions, but where it's like, if you want to do that, whatever. But like, I mean, as the movement, as a group, we kind of take like that neutral stance. But it's like, we're kind of like, we're more just trying to be like, hey, you know, like even simple stuff like, you know, having like get-togethers, like drinking beers and stuff like that. I mean, honestly, like, not to get political, that does far more than damn near any political thing you're ever going to do is.
Absolutely. Well, they said the American Revolution was started in pubs and taverns, right? So
yeah. So
maybe the next one will as well.
Yeah, so that's cool. I'll definitely. Yeah, we already have shirts too. Like, we already got a merch store. I'll have to send you one. We took a Florida flag and kind of went a little subversive with it, and then we kind of put the ANCAP thing behind it, so it's kind of like over, like, so there's shirts and everything. He's got tank tops, t-shirts.
Very cool. Very cool.
I'll show you. You'll probably dig it. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely.
It's funny. A lot of people, when we started doing flags, because that's kind of what we did for a lot of chapters, we did flags. And a lot of people were kind of like, why would you do that? Because that's like status. But it's like, well, no, you're kind of like subverting the status aspect of it, kind of. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a piece of cloth. It is whatever you make it, right?
Yeah. So, all right, to go back to where we were at, I want to know probably your earliest memories from childhood. Because like one thing I brought up with Vin is like, for me, I think that can like mean a lot. For some people, it doesn't mean a lot. For some people, it does. Like, I told Vin, I have no problem going over it because it's been a long time. Like, some of my earliest memories was my mother getting beaten as a child. So like that affected me a lot growing up. And so a lot of times people's earliest memories are stuff that kind of form them as a human being. So like me, like I have 2 daughters, a wife. I'm kind of, so I've always taken the protector role very seriously as a result of that, So yeah, so I'll stop rambling and let you go on now.
Yeah, no. It's funny you say it too, because it's interesting. One of the, I was born in 87. So it was, I remember right outside my window, we had like this home heating oil tank. Uh, and I can remember this was like Gulf War One. This was Bush Senior at the time. I can remember thinking I was like, 3, 4 years old, something like that. I can remember thinking like Saddam Hussein and George Bush are going to meet up and they're going to have like a big fight because Saddam Hussein wants to come take the oil in this tank. And I can remember thinking like that was what they were going to do. And it's funny because, you grow up and you learn that that's not the way it works. But eventually here I am 34 years later and I'm like, well, that is the way it should work, right? Saddam Hussein and George Bush should meet in a field and fight each other instead of sending other people's children to go do it before them. They should go fight in the field. So, it's ironic. My 3 or 4-year-old self was more keen on foreign policy than most U.S. diplomats and members of the State Department. So that was one of the first really memories that I can think of in terms of like that really shaped me like politically. I also remember like asking my parents about abortion and stuff like that. I was sort of like, wow, they let people do that? Like that's sort of crazy. And my opinions on abortion of this was I was like 5 years old. I've been for it and against it and for it and against it and stuff like that. So, but those are just a couple of the main things I can think of that come to the top of my head.
It's funny. It's like because it kind of does hold true that it is like kind of formed you. Because as silly as that anecdote was, you could kind of see how that formed you as an adult. It's like obviously mine was a little bit darker than yours, but whatever, same effect.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. All right. So tell me about young Sal, little Sal, like probably like pre-high school, pre-middle school. What was life like for you then?
I was honestly, I was always like a super nerd. I was like really like into politics and philosophy, and like it sounds crazy, but I was reading like Plato and stuff. Yeah, it really was. It was crazy, and it's sort of that is really probably what shaped me the most was like that whole like I went through this whole like reading Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and like all these different philosophers like heavily for like 2 or 3 years at a very young age. And that really gave me like an appreciation for logic, right? That's what really let me see the power of logic. And then I went to college and I took classes in logic and I studied under some really well-known logicians. And I sort of was able to hone my skills. And I think that's sort of what helped me identify agorism as being so powerful because it was it is the logical consistency of agorism that makes it so powerful. That's what gives counter economics its strength is the logical consistency. And I think a lot of that in my formative years helped me sort of spot it when I saw it later on, when I saw it in the wild,
Yeah, that's funny. I'm a little bit jealous there because I wish I had kind of gotten that base of like logic because I don't think I really got well trained in logic until I was like a young adult because it was honestly probably more of my religious. Like I went from it was kind of a big deal for me going from being religious to being what I consider an atheist. And a lot of people in the weeds. I'm an agnostic atheist. I don't assert that there is no God. I just claim I don't know, and that seems to be the only logical position for me personally. But anyways, like going through that and exploring that is kind of because like I really dive deep in that because even when I went that way, my family would always like kind of like be like, well, what about this or what about that? And so like while in a sense I kind of didn't really care what they had to say, it was like really irritating that it would always be framed like I was being an idiot. So I kind of had to go really deep and like learn the logic of a lot of that stuff and go into all that. And like going down that route really taught me about like fallacies and like how proper logic works. And it was just kind of like sad that like I didn't learn that until I was a young adult. So it's like, I don't know. It's just one of those things that it's like, this should be fundamental to education. And I was a nerd too. I read a ton. I just I was smart, but I didn't have that base of logic,
I think that that's part of the plan though. I think that they don't want kids to learn logic. Like you're not supposed to be 12 years old and reading Plato. Like they don't want that. That's not good for them, right? Because then you will spot the logical consistency of agorism and you'll end up dedicating your life to subverting the state like me. So that's not what they want. They want people who can't see these things. You would never accept a scientific theory that isn't logically consistent. So why would you accept a political or economic theory that's logically inconsistent? But that's what so many people, millions and hundreds of millions of Americans do it every day, precisely because they're so poorly trained in logic. They're so ignorant of formal and informal logic, fallacies and all the stuff that you were talking about and so on. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
It is. It's funny too because you can actually still be smart, but like I said, because like I was kind of nerd too at a young age. I was like voracious reader. I just read all the time. All I did was read, but I didn't have that like I never really had that base of logic. So like you can be smart but not understand basic logic. And the funny ththing is, ironically, even in the atheist community, because I kind of like was sort of dabbled in that community, a lot of people have the same exact issue. They have all the logical know all the proper logical stuff, and they're really smart, a lot of them, but they fall into the same trap of like statism, and it's like they just replace one god for another, essentially, kind of deal. Like that's a common trope of atheism, and it's true.
Exactly, that's exactly what they're doing, and instead of some fictional god who they can at least pretend is benevolent, they don't. Now they have to pretend he's benevolent, and they know it's in their face how evil and terrible they are. So
yeah. All right, let's move on. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Let's move on to let's do like middle school, high school age. Like, what were we looking at with Sal there?
So at this point, I'm sort of like a troublemaker at this point. I'm kind of getting into trouble now, and I'm sort of like having run-ins with authority, like different like school teachers and cops and stuff like that. And I'm basically rebelling at this point.
Specifically, what age? I'm just curious because, like, for me, I didn't hit that spot until I was like 16. I mean, I did a little childhood silliness around like 8th grade, but then I like went real off the rails and drugs and all the sex and all that craziness around like 17. So I'm just kind of curious. It's always fun to hear like where people kind of went off the rails in that way.
I say like probably like 16, 17, 18, okay, around there. Yeah, probably about that age. I mean, I wasn't too crazy, I was just, selling weed and, just staying out late and partying and shit like that. Not reading Plato and Socrates and Aristotle.
Yeah. That's funny. Did you find that being the spot where you kind of dropped off in your education as well? Because that's kind of like where I dropped off. Because like I said, I was a nerd as a kid, kind of got really into reading. And I kind of also like fell into like the jock thing where I kind of was big into sports in high school. And so then it was like kind of not cool to be smart in a way, and like, or be the one who reads all the time. And the kind of same thing I had Mark Claire on yesterday. It was the same thing with comics, where it was like I kind of like put that aside. And it's one of those things as you get older, you kind of stop fucking caring what people think. So like, I don't know.
I mean, in a certain sense, but at the same time, like I've always read. Like I've always been a nerd. I don't care. Like they can, that's just the way I've always been. And other than that, I don't know. It's never really been like I've never really cared what other people have to think or say or do. So I've always just kind of gone my own route, and reading is always like fundamental. That's sort of, to me, like that's sort of like one of the main components of my life. Like people like enjoy music or art and stuff, and I'm like a huge bookworm. So that's sort of like I would never give that up.
Yeah, I regret big time. That's probably one of my biggest regrets is I didn't keep reading. And it wasn't entirely that I care what people think. A lot of it too was like I got really caught up in like drugs and chicks and trying to get ass and all that. So I was just more like my time was elsewhere. If I had spare time, I was having fun.
That too, but then I would go home and I would be like reading.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I did that for sure.
Yeah. Right.
Because like I said, I didn't get back into reading because I probably was reading up until like hardcore until like 12, 13, 14, kind of stopped. And it wasn't even until my early 20s that I really got back into it. And it's like, it's such a dead spot where it was like, God, it was just such a fucking waste. It's like I wasn't making anything of myself.
It's really true what they say. I think it was Michael Malice who said public school is prison. And like, that was very true in my experience. Like I was absolutely miserable in public school, and my goal every day was to make the principal's life as much of a living hell as I possibly could. And I think like I wasn't even supposed to graduate. I think that they just they didn't want to put up with me anymore, so like they just pushed me out the door. Like you need a certain GPA or whatever it was, and I was like 0.86 or something. I just stopped going to class at a certain point. But then I got to college, and you can study things you like. So I was a political science major, and I was always interested in politics. And that's when I went from like, you know, 0.86 GPA in public high school to like a 4.0 at like a private university. So it just goes to show you the difference, you know, when you're passionate about something versus when you're a prisoner of the state.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I ended up going to college, but I tanked hardcore because I think I was still more into that, like, you know, the American dogma of like I'm just supposed to like do what it's expected of me to some extent, because I went to just do like some generic. I don't remember. I think I went to be like a biology major, but it wasn't, which I kind of mildly enjoyed. Like looking back, like all the things that like I would have been interested in are the kind of stuff that like I feel like people would be like, you're wasting your time, because I would have definitely enjoyed, you know, doing that. But I just, in the end, I am just wasting a semester. I just blew it, you know, just friggin' was in a drunken drug stupor for like, you know, a semester, and then I was just like, luckily I did well in high school, so I had all like scholarships, so it was like, you know, I didn't really actually have to pay for it, but I was like, if I kept going, I lost all my scholarships, so I was like, I'm gonna have to pay for it. So it's like, nah, I'm gone. But
Enough's enough. As soon as they send that bill, we'll see you later.
yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, I guess that was a fun little free ride, but I'm out. Yeah, but yeah, no, like I did definitely wish I had just like I'd gone that route, you know. But
Well, that's sort of what that's really, not to like jump the gun here, but that's sort of what really it really helped me sort of in the end, in the long run, because when I went to like college and like I sort of focused on political science, and then I realized that by the time I got my graduate degree, my master's degree, that, you know, I have all these degrees in political science now, and I've become a Rothbardian now, and I realized I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to take some job as a lobbyist or go work for as a consultant for some congressman or somebody that I think should be in prison. So that's why I really decided to go the other route and start a podcast and a blog, and you know, sort of be active on social media. I figured, you know, if I can't make a living doing what I'm passionate about, the traditional route, well, then I'll sort of pave my own route. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm sort of doing now.
yeah, and it's funny too. I was just thinking while you're talking that I feel like the normal thing you're like expected to go certain routes in life, and like everyone has their things they really do like, you know, or are interested in. And a lot of times those are put down as like, you know, that's like the dumb thing. Don't do that. There's no future there. But in a weird way, I feel like I've become more educated now as an adult, just reading things I enjoy and, you know, going down those routes than the people who may have gone down the traditional, like what was expected of them, you know, say they went and got a nursing degree when they didn't really want to. And yeah, maybe they have a piece of paper behind their name, but it's like, it wasn't something they were passionate about. So it's like, they didn't really learn anything. It's like, whereas me, I'm in my spare time, I'm reading like, I don't know, Agorist Primer or something like that. You know, like this is stuff that I find to be fun. And so I'm like, these things are sticking more with me than they are with other people, you know? So I think there's
Well,
something
that's the
there
whole
with that.
thing. If you're like, yeah, no, if you like something and you're passionate about it, you love it, like you'll pick it up quickly. But if it's sort of like a drudge and you have to work at it, then, you know, it's sort of how I felt in high school versus how I felt in college, right? Like I had to push myself through high school. I barely did, but like college, I enjoyed reading those books. I was thankful when I got my syllabus because, you know, right here you have these like smart people telling you what books to read if you want to learn about politics, and I did. So you know, like I feel like today people go to school for that piece of paper, for that degree, but like I don't know, I that wasn't me. I really went to school for like the old school reason of getting an education, you know. And that sounds, you're sort of cliche, but
Yeah. Hey, just two questions that I kind of want to kind of maybe explain where you're at right now. What would you consider yourself at this time or at that time? You know, around that time of like I don't know, like early college. Would you and also were you just kind of always a libertarian, or are you one of those folks who kind of, you know, because most people have their story of like came from the left or came from the right or whatever. You know, I mean, I think the political compass is broken, but you know, colloquially speaking. So
right.
yeah.
I was always like this sort of constitutionalist sort of guy, and then I was always libertarian, but I just didn't know it. And then Ron Paul came around. I can remember watching the debates, and like all of the people on stage at the Republican debates that I was supposed to be, you know, the standard candidates from who exhibited the acceptable range of opinion, they all looked like lunatics to me. And the only one who really made any sense was Ron Paul. And that was the guy who I was supposed to think was crazy. So that really touched something off in my head. I was like, that's sort of odd. Let me look into this guy a little bit more. And I started Googling, and next thing I know, I found his economic advisors were Peter Schiff and Walter Block. And because I was always active in political science, I knew that the libertarians were very like, they had their stuff down in terms of economics. So I wanted to know who Ron Paul's economic advisors were. And then I saw the Peter Schiff was right videos, and I saw Walter Block explaining these concepts in like an academic format in like on YouTube, and it sort of all just clicked for me. It was like, going back to that logical consistency. I was like, wow, this is much more consistent than anything else I've come across yet. And that's how I moved from constitutionalist to like libertarian party, minarchists, sort of, small government kind of guy, like Justin Amash kind of dude. And like that's where I was at about 2000, and I don't know if I guess this was 2010, 11, 12, probably around there.
So would you say you came from, I mean, you said you're constitutionalist, and I feel like a lot of constitutionalists, especially around that time, I'm 29, I'm like 4 years younger than you. So we're probably pretty much come from a lot of places. I'm actually originally from Maine as well. So we're both originally from New England. I mean, I was a country boy because Maine's country, but I digress. Point I'm getting at is I kind of came from like the right in a sense, and my family was like kind of in between neocon and constitutionalists, and it's sounding like you were kind of there as well. Like they weren't full on neocons, they weren't full on constitutionalists. They were that kind of generic, like what the generic conservative essentially, where they're kind of falling between somewhere. Would that be describe you, or am I off?
No,
like
no, that's
your upbringing. I meant, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's pretty accurate. By and large, my family was all mostly Republicans. My father's side was all Democrats. My mother's side was all Republicans. My immediate family were like much more conservative. I was, like I said, I was always like a constitutionalist, and like that always led me to support right-wing candidates. And then I remember when George Bush did the whole "No Child Left Behind" thing, I was like, you know what? There's just sort of a light bulb went off. I was like, wow, these guys are not small government people. So there's something up here, right? When No Child Left Behind hit, I was like, I've wanted to get rid of the Department of Education at this point, right? That was part of the Republican Party's platform throughout the 90s, was to abolish the DOE. Nowadays, they're funding the DOE. They're giving them increases in funding. But at the time, it was part of the platform was that they opposed the DOE. And all of a sudden, you have George Bush come in reverse course and just blow it out of proportion and give it this huge budget and expand its powers. And I really felt betrayed. And that's what sort of led me to look for alternatives. And then, of course, there was a 2008 financial crisis and these sort of confluence of events that sort of led me to spot Ron Paul at the debates. And I was like, that guy's actually making a lot of sense, Like I'm supposed to think he's crazy, but he's making a lot of friggin' sense. And that's when like I said, that's when I started researching it.
Okay, cool. I was just kind of trying to figure out kind of where you came from, because it seemed like, I don't know. Also, all right, I'll back up a little bit. I kind of want to know a little bit about your parents specifically, because it seemed like our family are very similar. And I'm not trying to trash my mom, not that she even watches this, but or my dad either. But they were kind of the generic, conservatives. And I guess I feel like growing up, I kind of felt like I had a certain path to go down to. But it seems like your family is very different, but yet they're very similar the same way. Were they just more like a free, do whatever you want kind of deal? Or, because it seemed like you were kind of just or maybe you were just that much of a free spirit. I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of curious how your parents were essentially.
My parents were like, sort of blue-blooded, flag waving Americans, sort of, the normal sort of run of the mill sort of statists, probably more conservative than anything, but they would go both ways when they had to. I think they were both registered members of the Republican Party. Now my father's like a diehard Republican, and so is my mother. But at the time, they were a little bit more liberal. I was always I would go my own way. Like I had no problem, disagreeing with anybody at any time. But I just happened to be, like I said, small government, and the Republicans at the time, at least they were portraying themselves as the party of small government. Back in the 90s, Newt Gingrich got, a balanced budget passed. Like that's unheard of today. Congress would never do something like this. So like there was still like life, there was still a pulse left of the small government wing of politics, I guess, at that point. But it was, obviously it was dying, and now it's completely dead. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to get a feel of what your family was like because our family sound very similar. I mean, mine probably a little bit more rural than yours were because you were more in like a city type thing, I'm assuming. And yeah, so let's move on and let's do like okay, we're at like college. Let's see what if you're a constitutionalist at this time. Let's walk me through because I mean you have like a shitload of degrees, don't you? But I'm assuming at some point you stopped going to university. You weren't doing university life anymore, right? You were
Yeah,
kind of being
right.
over. Or sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to Seton Hall, and in like 2007, eight, something like that. And this is when I started to become like more libertarianish and like more stated libertarian. And I was, like I said, I was becoming like a small government sort of libertarian. I was going to party meetings and stuff like that, and which was an absolute disaster. That helped me see later on what a joke the Libertarian Party is, because I saw it from the inside out. And right about at this time, I'm listening to the Tom Woods show a lot at this point, and I never really wanted to be um, one of these crazy anarchists. Right? I didn't want to be one of these wacky anarchists because who's going to take you seriously if you're an anarchist, right? That's crazy. And I was a big history nerd. Like I still am. I've always been a big history like sort of guy. Like I can read like a million history books in a week. I can't get enough of it. And Tom Woods, who's a historian, for any of the listeners out there who are unfamiliar with him, you should familiarize yourself with him because the man's absolutely brilliant. And he's got probably the best damn podcast that I can think of. And one day he's talking about this great historian that he knows of named Ralph Raico. So I'm like, all right, well, if it's good enough for Woods, it's good enough for me. I go home and I look up some Ralph Raico books, and I'm starting to watch some Ralph Raico YouTube lectures. And he's a history professor and whatnot. And this guy is brilliant, and he's got this sort of like grandfatherly vibe to him. Like I don't know, I just like really connected with him. I got the impression like clearly this man is not wacky, right? This guy's clearly not crazy. He's a normal sort of dude that you could see, at your Thanksgiving dinner table. So, and he's an anarchist. So that really gave me the confidence to accept the term anarchist. And he was friends with Murray Rothbard and Leonard Liggio. That's why I was like, all right, let me check out those guys too. And once I saw, my first Rothbard lecture, then it was all over. And then at that point, burn it down. Once you see Rothbard, it's a whole different. Your perception of the world is never the same.
Was that your moment? Did you when the first lecture when you decided? Because like I said earlier, my moment was reading Anatomy of the State. That was when I was like, I'm an anarchist. Because I was a fence sitter for a long time on the minarchy thing, like a long, long time. And I listened to Dave Smith for like ever, like because that's kind of like where I got a lot of that education, like more ANCAP education. And it wasn't he always was going on about Anatomy of the State, and I finally read it. And I probably listened to Dave for like probably at least a couple of years before I finally did. And then once I read Anatomy of State, I mean, it's funny, listening to Dave for like years, didn't do it, but like just reading Anatomy of State, I was like, yep.
Yeah. Rothbard. That's why Rothbard is so powerful. That's one of the first books I recommend to people is Anatomy of the State. But no, actually, I watched these Raico lectures and Leonard Liggio's lectures and Rothbard lectures, and I was still sort of like not fully there. And then this one particular lecture that Rothbard gave, I think it's called, you can look it up on YouTube. It's called like How I Became a Libertarian or something like that. And he tells the story of, I'm sure you're familiar. He used to have all these brilliant minds in his living room to discuss philosophy until like 3-4 o'clock in the morning. It would be him and Walter Block and all these brilliant folks, these names that we all know. They would be discussing these ideas in his living room late at night. And he had these liberals, these leftists there one night to discuss and philosophize with him. And the liberal said to him, well, Murray, why not privatize the police? And this is when Murray was a minarchist, and he said to them, oh, that's crazy. You can't do that. And he gave them some run-of-the-mill answer, and he started thinking to himself. He said later on when they went home, it sort of hit me. Hey, they're right. They were right. They had a point. I was being logically inconsistent. And Rothbard said from that point on, I was an anarchist. And I thought to myself, you know what? I can't think of any reason why the police shouldn't be privatized. So I also must be an anarchist. And that's when I sort of really came into my own. That's when I sort of like accepted everything and like really developed full force into like full on agorist or full on anarchism at this point. I wasn't an agorist yet. I was just a pure ANCAP Rothbardian.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, like I said, it was Anatomy of State for me. But it's like the what did it was because Anatomy of State just poked so many holes. Because everyone has this idea, like minarchist is like, you know, like, oh, if we just go back to the Constitution or whatever, and it's like, you know, it's kind of and at the end of the day, I always boil Anatomy of State, you know, down to like, you know, kind of almost in a way, kind of, you know, the meme where it's like, you know, you have the uppercase and lowercase letters kind of saying it stupid, like, oh, if we just had, you know, better people and that did better things, but you don't. So it's like, you know, like it kind of points out how the whole system is just flawed. Like even the most perfect system that you possibly can envision is just flawed. Like, and at the end of the day, you're just like, it's a systemic problem. And it's like, you can't just be like, well, if better people are there, but it's like, but the system is set up for better people to not be there.
Any sort of writing from Rothbard carries a punch to it, but Anatomy of the State is a knockout punch. That's certainly probably his most powerful piece of writing, I think.
Yeah, it definitely did it for me because I was like I said,
yeah.
But I was on the fence, so I was like, I guess in a sense too is also I was just looking for that, like, I don't know, it was like logically everything was making sense, but like some part of my brain which is like, no, you can't, like, because I guess just that, like, I don't know, the brainwashing essentially of like
You know what it
American
is? Yeah,
life.
exactly. And Tom Woods said it best. He said that the state's greatest victory was convincing people to fear the term anarchy and love the term government. And that's sort of the battle that I was stuck in. That's sort of what was holding me back. And it sounds like, you know, you were sort of dealing with something similar.
Yeah, it's like you almost like you just. It's more of a letting go thing because you're just like, it's like I logically completely understand why,
Yeah.
and it's like I can't even provide really a good reason. It's just that it's like, well, you just can't.
It's as simple as this, really, if you think about it. If you can't answer the following question, then you're an anarchist. What goods or services does the state provide us with, which the market is unable to provide at both a cheaper cost and a higher quality? Right? If the answer is nothing, then you're an anarchist. If you think there is something, if you think that there is something that the state can provide at a cheaper cost and a higher quality, then you're an economic illiterate. That's the difference.
Yeah. Okay. Where were we at? We kind of went off a tangent there, but I mean, I enjoyed it. Obviously, we were at kind of you're probably like what, like early 20s. So let's move to like kind of, I guess, more closer to where we are now, like mid 20s, late 20s. Kind of where were you at around that time? I mean, at that time, I'm assuming you're kind of getting established, doing your fucking thing, you know?
Yeah. So around 2015, I found I was familiar with agorism before this, but in around 2015, 2014, I think it was actually, I went to Porkfest in New Hampshire. So that was about 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago. I went to Porkfest in New Hampshire, and this was like a really formative like experience for me because I saw, you know, I had Bitcoin at this time, and Bitcoin was obviously much cheaper, and I had a bunch of Bitcoin, but for the first time, I saw people trading Bitcoin for goods and services at Porkfest. For food, you were paying in cryptocurrency or silver coins. I attended seminars on 3D printing and aquaponics. It's where I learned about 3D printing for the first time. So really, this is where I learned how to live as an anarchist rather than just think like an anarchist. So that was a real life-changing moment for me. And that really led me to get into aquaponics and cryptocurrencies and precious metals and 3D printing. And that sort of turned me into what I am now, right? And then shortly after that, I found Sam Konkin and agorism, and I was just blown away by the extreme logical consistency. Like it was sort of like levels of astonishment. Like when I found Ron Paul, I was like, wow, this guy is much more consistent than the Republican Party. And then I found, Rothbard, and I'm like, wow, that guy's so much more consistent than the small L libertarians, you know? And then I found Konkin, and I was like, whoa, this guy, he has it nailed down. Like this is the Picasso. This is the masterpiece. Like we found like the holy grail of the social sciences, right? You know, the other way to look at it is like I went to school for political science. I had bachelor's degree. I had a master's degree, and finally, like you see the theory, like you find the theory that like does it for you. You know, it's almost like when Stephen Hawking found like the theory of black holes, right? It's like that was what it was for me when I like first read Konkin, and that's when I knew like. Look at like I said, I was already familiar with 3D printing and cryptocurrencies. That's when Konkin sort of tied it all together for me and showed me the power of it all. And here we are today.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. We're like literally on the same path. It was Ron Paul, Mothbard, and Konkin that were like my, like those were my sweethearts. Like those were the ones who had those special moments. I mean, honestly, I'd say Rothbard is probably and Rothbard was probably the most impactful because I think something about that minarchist to anarchist shift is kind of like in a weird way the most important. And then it seemed like that like agorism one was almost like a fine tuning my direction in a sense. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think that's a good way of putting it too, because there's a big when you go from minarchist to anarchist, you're going from socialist to capitalist. When you go from ANCAP to agorist, you're going from capitalist to high functioning capitalist, right? Like that's basically the difference.
Yeah, that consistent capitalist. Yeah, in the true sense. Yeah. So, all right. So we're at that point about like mid to late 20s. So let's get to where you're at now. What is Sal doing these days? What projects are you working on?
Well, now, I started Agoristics, which is really mainly designed to help spread the mass adoption of cryptocurrencies. And the point is we just sort of, we're trying to we'll undertake any project that we think can help spread cryptocurrencies. But the point is to sort of make it easier for people to buy and sell things and normal goods and services. So one project we have is 3D Printer Go Burr, where we're selling 3D printers and stuff for cryptocurrency, and it sort of helps people work around the sort of KYC payment platforms that they would normally use. So that's really taking up a lot of my time. I do a lot of blogging and affiliate marketing, content marketing. I'm pretty active on social media, on Twitter. I run a meme page, Sal the Agorist. I run another meme page on Facebook when I'm not banned or in Facebook jail, called Print Guns Not Money. I host the Agora podcast about Agorist theory and counter economics. I also co-host Unloose the Goose with a bunch of great agorists every Wednesday. I missed today, actually. I missed a little bit earlier. So they're going to be mad at me when they see me on this show.
I know I was thinking that earlier when I was watching it.
So I'm staying busy, that's for sure. And we're at Agorist, we're always expanding, and we're starting new companies, and not all of them succeed, but not all of them fail. Some are more successful than others. So we're always I'm always staying busy. I do a lot of blogging too for Agorist Nexus, newlibertarian.io, and also at 3D Printer Go Burr, we have a blog about 3D printing. So I don't really have enough time in the day to do everything that I need to do. So I'm certainly staying busy, and I'm really thankful and blessed because, one of the things I said to Pete Quinones recently when we were chatting was like, Sam's dream was always to make a living as an agorist, as a counter economist. And now if you look at how many people are actually doing it, it's really wild, right? Like people are making full-time incomes, like myself and Jack Spirko and Pete Quinones and Vin Armani, and like all these folks are doing this in a full-time basis. And it's incredible to see how far agorism has come in the last 15 years. It just blows my mind. It's just a shame that Sam wasn't around to see it. Neil was around to see the end of it. He died a couple of years ago, so he did see a little bit of it, which makes me happy. But man, it's incredible how far we've come, and I think it's incredible how far we're going to be in another 15 years.
Yeah, it is cool because it is like that's one thing I've thought about a few times where it's like, I mean, Konkin is like kind of newer because I don't remember when he wrote NLM. It was kind of what was it like late 80s, early 90s, something like that.
Yeah,
around that time. But like, it's like I think a lot. I mean, I'm not sure when he died either. Do you remember when he died? Just real quick.
2004, Sam died.
So like 2004 is kind of like, yes, it feels like he's a newer philosopher or whatever you want to call him, and he kind of was. But at the same time, he still was gone before we really hit those things that would really be like, this is super agoric or whatever you want to call it. Like, I mean, there's some of them are like
Yeah,
the beating sages, but like, between
and it's
seasteading,
incredible how
Bitcoin,
quickly.
3D printers, all that.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible how quickly he has sort of been elevated into like with the high ranking philosophers, like people tell you to study Rothbard and Proudhon and Marx, and you want to read all these lunatics and stuff like that, for better or worse. And Konkin's right up there with all of them. And of course, in my mind, he's the smartest of all of them. He was the one who got it right. But I think it's well deserved, the place that he's earned for himself so quickly.
Yeah, and one thing you brought up before that I thought was kind of smart, and what I've told a lot of people when it comes to Konkin, I don't ever really suggest Konkin. This is actually something that I got from you, I don't remember what it was, like one of your podcasts or what. I don't ever suggest him unless it's somebody who's already like an ANCAP. It's kind of like, because it's kind of the whole idea of the remnant, and I consider like Konkin being people who are the remnant of the remnant. If you're one of them, then like you should probably read Konkin, and it's like you need to be already like a hardcore ANCAP before you're ready to embrace the ideas of Konkin, in my eyes. And that's from something I heard you say in one of your podcasts before, and it really clicked. I was like, yeah, you're totally fucking right.
Yeah, your normal Libertarian Party member, you're not going to get somebody from the Republican Liberty Caucus to all of a sudden support taking down the Federal Reserve with sound money alternatives. They're not going to do that. They want to subsist the Federal Reserve so they can pay for their warfare state. So at the end of the day, and I think Sam said that he said that why waste your time and effort trying to convince somebody who's not going to who clearly isn't there yet? Focus on people, the more radical ANCAPs, the ones who are almost there. They're one step away from agorism, and sort of show them the door. You can't make a horse walk through the door, but you can show it to them.
Yeah. I mean, and it's also too, it's always funny, like if you do try to tell these ideas, which I've kind of felt victim to, like, like people who are just generic Republicans or Democrats, they're just gonna be like, what? You want me to sell blow to undermine the state? Like, no, that's not what I'm saying.
I know. Well, that's the other thing too that we combat, is that we have that sort of they think that we're sort of like street urchins, I guess. Which, in a sense, they're not completely incorrect, right? There is certainly that element of agorism, but that's not. It's based in sound philosophy and theory, and I think that's the part that a lot of people miss.
Yeah. No, all right. Well, we're probably at a good point to go ahead and do plugs and stuff. I mean, I had a lot of fun with this. I know you kind of promised one of your buddies you wanted to go. You were going to be heading out here soon, so and we're right about that time, and we're kind of like right at the perfect spot in the conversation. Although I am having fun with this, and I'd like to keep going. But we'll go ahead and do that here. We're at the perfect spot anyways. So do you have any other plugs you want to drop? We kind of like the last little bit kind of was plugs, but a little bit like an informal version of plugs, if you will. So I don't know if you want to go.
Yeah. That's basically it. Other than that, the only other thing I can tell people is check out saltheagorist.com or saltheagorist.com. That's where I sort of update everything and keep my podcasts and blog posts, and I sell T-shirts and all stuff. So check out saltheagorist.com also.
Cool. I'll do my plugs real quick. Like I always say, we'll put you just send me when you get a chance, send me your stuff, and I'll throw it in the video description. But my stuff and your stuff, put it all in the video description. Just recently I added, I'm on a audio podcast now, just this show, the No Way Jose. Wasn't able to really figure out how to do the other shows. We also, on the Liberty Movement YouTube channel, we added the Last Nighters, who they have their own YouTube channel as well. Go check them out. If you go to subscribe to them instead of just following them on this channel, you'll be able to get like more like up-to-date content, because we wait about a week before we upload their stuff. That way we're not jacking their new stuff. And also they have like a huge library of shit. They do reviews of movies kind of from a libertarian perspective. They also have the actual anarchy one where they go more deep into the libertarian perspective, and they kind of like, they go more political. Essentially, the idea is the Last Nighters is supposed to be more like suited for normies. Essentially, if you want to be able to share that to your normie friends and kind of be like, hey, here's this movie I know you like, here's a review of it, and then they kind of drop little subtle hints of libertarianism in there. We also got the Liberty Movement Facebook group. We're on MeWe now. The YouTube. We also got our YouTube set up on Library, BitChute. We also got the email, thelibertymovementglobal@gmail.com. We're also, if you're hearing this right now, send me an email. We're trying to set up an email list. So every email we get, we throw in the email list. We need to get it more official and set up like an actual like email list thing. But I'm kind of a tech idiot. So, I'm working with what we got. So send it to me. We're trying to get here. We're trying to collect all the emails we can, and we're going to set up a website here soon or a newsletter. That's something we've been trying to work on for a while. We also got the merch. You've seen me drinking that cup. I also mentioned to Sal that we have the Florida chapter ones. We have all sorts of stuff. That'll be in the bottom in the video description, all the merch. So like I said, they have the chapters there too. So they're the Florida flag with the end cap thing behind it. Like, share, subscribe, comment, do all that good shit. And with that, Deuce, it's been great having you, Mayweather. Why did I call you Mayweather? Sal. Fucking weird. But
no worries, brother. No, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. And hey, man, I had a blast. Let's do this again.
Yeah, no, I really had a fun time. And then the idea of this episode was so that we could set the groundwork for later talks. So, because I could
Absolutely.
see, especially when I'm a tech idiot, I kind of was like, I see possibility of a lot of episodes here. So how do I open Excel? Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not that
hopefully
bad.
Sooner than later. Hopefully sooner than later we can do it.
Yeah, for sure. I almost was tempted because I want to do one on crypto because I still haven't even gone into crypto, which is like a shame because it's like everything about crypto is like right up my alley, but it's just the tech thing that's like I don't fucking know. Yeah, I've heard it a million times.
That's why I'm here, brother.
Yeah, so I figured we'd probably maybe here soon probably do like a crypto for dummies episode. And by dummies, I mean me.
Shoot me a DM, yes. Shoot me a DM, and we'll take it down.
Yeah. All right, I'll let you go, man. This has been really fun. All right.
Thank you, brother.
All right, we'll see you, man. Bye.